Alright, so what's up YouTube? Today I'll be telling you about how I passed the CPA AUD exam first try using only Becker as my study material. Now I know some people use Farhat lectures, I know some people use the Ninja multiple choice supplementation, and I think those are good resources you can use towards your CPA study, but overall I think Becker does a good job in and of itself to cover everything you need to know. Becker does teach from the perspective that you did just graduate from college. So if you have been out of school, for 5-10 years, then I would say go with Farhat lectures or go with Ninja. I'll put in the description links to both the YouTube channel and those resources for you. But overall, for the audit CPA exam, I did use Becker. I can't speak on Wiley, Gleim, or Roger. Becker has been the gold standard for a while, and so if you can afford that price tag, I would highly suggest taking that price tag. But for auditing, overall, it took me 94 hours of study over 1 month, and that did include a COVID diagnosis in the middle, so I missed a few days because of that. But with those 94 hours, I think it would be suitable for most people to pass on time, as compared to FAR, it took me 215 hours. So this exam was quick. And a lot of that was due because of my study process. So there's people who suggest studying for 8 hours a day on weekends, or sitting for 5 hours at a time. I don't suggest doing that. I'm big on the law of diminishing returns. Essentially, your first hour of study is not your fifth hour of study. They're not equal. You will not retain the same information, and you will not retain the same information, and it will be not as effective as your first hour. So essentially, when I did approach my study, I would try and keep it the same hours per day, around 3 to 4 hours per day, even on weekends. So weekdays, weekends, 4 hours. 4 hours is the max. And if I did study, it'd be 2-hour blocks at a time. Same thing. Beyond those 2 hours, you're going to have diminishing returns on what you can retain at that time period. So 2-hour blocks, 4 hours a day, you're looking at around 20 a week, give or take. Here and there, maybe you feel more motivated to study a little bit more. Maybe some days you're busy and you can't study as much, but that's the general timeline I'm going to suggest you do for your study. But for the actual process, I did follow Becker's guidelines between the lectures, into the skills practice, into the multiple choice, into the simulations. Now for the lectures, I did do 1.5 speed. They talk really slow, so I would suggest watching it on 1 speed, maybe even 2.0 if you want to get done faster. But 1.5 for me was a sweet spot where they were talking quickly, but not so fast that I couldn't keep up and understand what they were saying. This is where my approach actually changes for most people. It starts with multiple choice. Now, when I'm doing the lectures, right, I am writing the notes in my actual book, and I'm underlining what they tell me to underline. I didn't take actual freehand notes. I only used my book as my notebook, okay? So, and that's important later, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But when you do the multiple choice, you're not looking at your notes. So you're gonna do it purely based off of the lecture you just watched, the skills practice you just did, and just based off of pure memory and understanding. So since it should be kind of fresh, you just watched it, but essentially when you don't look at your notes, it's going to highlight your problem areas for later. So when I was studying for FAR and I looked at my book during multiple choice questions, I realized that I wasn't retaining the same information as I was if I just struggled through it and actually got them wrong and came back later. So you're going to do the multiple choice. You're going to get, probably 70%, 80% if you're lucky. I've had 50% on some question packets, but it's important to get things wrong and to fall into mistakes now so that you can highlight the problems for later. And also, I'm a big believer in making mistakes and learning from them. I think the best way to learn, at least from my perspective and from my experience, is to make mistakes and to fall in all the pit traps so that you can avoid those traps later. And funny enough, with how auditing works, it is all based on judgment. There's almost, I would say, it's like 97% words and judgment based. So a lot of these questions are going to be trickery based, and they're going to have trap questions and trap answers that you're probably going to fall through. And it's important to fall through them in your review so that when the real exam comes, you can recognize these problems. these tricks and avoid them. And I will say, Becker's, some of the tricks I saw on Becker's multiple choice questions came up on the exam, and I couldn't help but laugh at myself because I made those mistakes while I was in my review. So I would say, do not look at your notes. Do them off of memory. You're gonna get them wrong, but that's okay. They highlight the problems for later. You're gonna do the full module down as it is, as I said. And at the end of the module, the last part of the chapter, you're going to redo all of the wrong questions from your first attempt, and have that repetition, and you're going to see the same things you have trouble before. Again, don't look at your notes. It's all about retention and repetition of your weak areas before that's ingrained in your memory. So you're going to redo all the questions you got wrong the first time. That is my active review throughout the chapter. I don't do cumulative reviews. I don't do chapter reviews after I've done them later until I'm actually in my final review process, right? So you're gonna redo all the wrong questions. Let's say you got 8 wrong still. You're gonna leave those there for the next day and you're gonna redo them. Again, repetition is key. Repetition, time investment in the areas you're having trouble with is gonna be how you retain information, right? So you start at the next module. Whenever you do that, same thing, go through the lectures, go into the skills practice, do the multiple choice without looking at your notes, go through the simulations. Now, I've had a lot of people say they don't do simulations and they're a waste of time. I beg to differ. I will say my auditing simulations on the exam were not similar to my auditing simulations on Becker in terms of material, but it's the same format. And it's the same exposure as you would have if you did the actual Becker simulations. Now, so I want to give you a scenario, right? Let's say you're taking your exam, you did no simulations on your Becker review, and you sit down and your first sim has 9 exhibits, okay? And each exhibit is a document with new information and you feel overwhelmed. Do you want that feeling of being overwhelmed and having no idea how to organize your information on the final exam? Or do you want that feeling in your review so that when it comes on your final exam, you're ready and you're prepared for something that's going to be to that extent, right? You need to I think you need to do the simulations just to have the experience to be confident when they come up on the exam, right? But also in the same sense, they also are cumulative reviews of the entire chapter sometimes, or more comprehensive than your actual multiple choice questions. So if you can answer the multiple choice questions, no problem. But you're a little bit confused about simulations, that can highlight that you didn't have the understanding you thought you would, right? So I would say do the simulations. So you're gonna do every chapter, A1 through A6. Now, in terms of pacing per chapter, some people say you want to do, 2 a week to finish in 1 month. I didn't. So if you look at Becker's review, they'll have a percentage complete number smack in the middle of your review material. So I would use that over the 2 models per week. So if you want to do 3 weeks, that's 33% per week, right? So that way, you don't leave 2 large models for 1 week and then feel overwhelmed and having to do twice as much hours and work just to fulfill the 2 model per week metric. So do the percentage instead, 30% per week. Now for the final review at the end, so you did all 6 chapters, right? You're gonna review each chapter 1 per day. You're gonna do, you're gonna reread the book, right? So this is where your notes come into play. In the book, you have everything highlighted, you have everything written down in your book that shows you the important areas you need to retain. So you're gonna skim those notes in your book, and then you're gonna redo all the multiple choice in a chapter. Now, per chapter, there's maybe 150 to 250 per chapter complete, right? So it shouldn't take you more than 3 or 4 hours max in the same hours you've been putting before. And you can do this so quickly now because you've seen the questions that you're confused about. You've seen them multiple times and you've fallen for the mistakes. You recognize the mistakes now, but it's also a review of the stuff you already knew before. I don't suggest doing a Becker final review. I suggest just giving yourself the day off before the exam to rest. I think there's value in letting your mind at ease the day before and just relaxing. So I hope that helps. I do get my BEC grade on the 23rd coming up, so I might make a video on my reaction to that. I'm a little bit stressed out, but I do think I passed. But when I do pass, I will make a video about how I did that too as well. All right. So hope that helps. See you.